Welcome, everybody, and particularly welcome uh, both the USICOR and the KCOR members, so that we almost have a blended session this afternoon. So glad about that, and welcome for those who come from Europe and Africa and other places. Marilyn Mosley Gordanier started distance learning in the United States in 1991, and hers was the first distance school in the USA and has largest provision of personalized education in K through 12, that is before the tertiary school, in the United States at this point. It has expanded exponentially from her original small distance learning for hands full of children in the past 30 years. She also co-founded a Catholic school which has 8,000 distance learners per year called Mother of Grace in the United States. And in Japan, she helped co-found the Arikola Internet High School, as well as Laurel Springs C2 in Korea. And she's going to tell you about some of these, as well as her Afghanistan school for women. She's on the board for Educate Girls Now, which is an NGO, and she's the educational chair of the Ted Turner Foundation, as well as the Secretary General for the Global 500 Laureates, which is how I met her, because we were both Unep awardees. And she's an associate member of the Club of Rome. Today, she'll be addressing you about the founding and origin of the Laurel Springs School. As I said, started in 1991 and began with 8,500 children, but now millions around the globe benefit from all those early experimental and excellent kinds of learning of the methodologies. UNICEF has said that by 2030, there are going to be 3.5 million children who are digitally organized with the internet. It's a flexible mode of delivery. You can do it on computers, smart tabs, tablets, and John has done it on cell phones, which we heard about in February. A distance learning capability may fulfill the dire needs of the 263 million children who are out of the educational system, according to UNESCO and the World Bank. So the origin and growth of distance learning, especially in this COVID epidemic, has been astounding. And it's a model for the world's children to be associated once more back with learning. So with that, I give it to the very talented and brilliant Marilyn Mosley Gordanier.
Thank you, Anitra. It's really a pleasure to be here. And I have to say also an amazing opportunity to reflect back on all that has taken place. And I wanted to kind of share with you our history of how we began, because I actually came to California. I was born here, but I came back in 1974, similar to John Gilmore, to start the first homeschooling program, which was immensely unpopular and illegal. And we felt the need to educate children because we felt that without the inclusion of parents, you were missing an opportunity to really create in children a new way of learning, and also an opportunity for them to reinforce what they had been learning at school so they could take it back home. So we came in 1974. You can imagine I was very young. We drove our Volkswagen vans across country to start our first program there called Oak Meadow. And with that, we began the process of homeschooling with a very organic approach to learning at home, appreciation for the land, appreciation for cooking at home, and beginning a very integrated approach that was very Waldorf based. But then in 1991, I felt a need to expand. I felt that we were moving into a new direction and a new opportunity. But we were in the middle of I wanted to share with you, for those who, are hearing us from around the world, it was a very constrained time for learning. The focus was on seat time. That was passionate for teachers. How much seat time is your children complying to? There was an intense focus on testing. No child left behind. And by the way, the byword among teachers was no child left untesting, because not only were the children held responsible for the test results, but were the teachers. And you can imagine the pressure that this created. Rather than a focus on learning, the focus was on test scores. There were rigid tracks so that if you scored in one area, you were designed to go to a certain approach. And this created a very limited approach to learning and how children could expand and find out who they really were. At that time, homeschooling was illegal. I homeschooled my 3 children. When my parents found out about it, they were absolutely distraught. My son locked himself in the closet, and my mother was quite upset. And I do want to say that all 3 children graduated from college. My son became a major in the Air Force and went to Harvard. My 2 younger children are very renowned directors and visual effects artists. And so it really confirmed for me what I at that time hoped was true. And being young and idealistic, I saw that the opportunity was to create a curriculum that believed in the integral talents and gifts of each child. At that time, there were no customized curriculum. The concept was unheard of. And we began to promulgate what became the first customized curriculum. And at the same time, there were cutbacks in some of the most important areas: arts, talent, music, physical education. And so we were honing in on a very industrial-like approach to education that didn't allow an inner child to explore their gifts and talents. And as a young idealistic educator who'd worked for many, many organizations, NYU, and for numbers of schools, I'd done a drama program. I'd also worked on numbers of younger children education programs. I just saw this as untenable. And I thought at that age, I needed to do something different. Mainly, I felt like I needed to protect children so that they could flourish and be who they are, rather than being confined to an area that also indicated extreme burnout. And so we began an exploration into a program called Laurel Springs, which I founded with my late husband. It was focused on personalized learning with attributes and appreciation of every child's unique talent, and an appreciation for their dreams, an ability to use lifelong learning curriculum that had up to now been really unknown. It was a very defined approach. Teachers were stressed out about children testing appropriately. There was a joke going around in schools that rather than no child left behind, it was no child left untested. And as you can imagine, when children learn in different ways, sometimes testing children is not the way that you ascertain their gifts, their talents, and their really innate intelligence. We also felt that it was important to nurture a child's heart, mind, and soul. And my goal was to protect every child so that they could demonstrate their unique brilliance and talent. And to that end, I really saw that as our core mission. My original mission statement was and is that every child is a living human treasure capable of manifesting brilliance. So we were at an age where we were highly unpopular. Homeschooling was illegal. People could be put in jail for homeschooling. And we really took a leap with a very idealized approach to start a program that would allow children to begin to discover that they are absolutely talented. And the way they demonstrate their talent is in many different ways. It may not be in math and science. It may be in music. It may be in love of animals. It may be in developing beauty around them. And that was a huge jump. It hadn't been done. And we were known as the first school to personalize education, to personalize the way that they learn. I want to mention that homeschooling through Laurel Springs was completely different than a brick and mortar school. We were online. We also provided curriculum, and we did have a small once a week program for children who were in our area who could come and integrate with parents. But as you'll see in a few minutes, we were beginning to expand beyond California. 1991, there wasn't very much email. There wasn't an opportunity to communicate. And most of the work was done via tape. People would send in their materials, or it was done correspondence, or in addition, they had the opportunity to call their teachers. But we were limited. And so we began as a tiny program. I want to say that we started with 72 children with a huge amount of appreciation and idealism. We hadn't proved our premise yet, but we knew it was true. And as John Gilmore would say, that is the beauty of being young. We were absolutely sure that we were on the right track. And I am grateful that we followed that track and we didn't move off and try to conform at that point to the current approach. So Laurel Springs methodology, at that point, let me go back. So we designed the first online curriculum, and I'm going to go into that a little more lately. We created socio-emotional curriculum, which meant that we really acknowledged the gifts, emotional needs of our children, and we took that into consideration. Go back. Oops. Oh, we're going forward. We did something that was really unusual. We provided families with options, text-based, project-based, and online, and people could mix and match their opportunities. This was unheard of at the time. You were sent on a track, you followed that track, and if you succeeded on that track, you went to a certain job delineation. With Laurel Springs, we acknowledge that every child has a unique learning style. And with that unique learning style comes a need for a very different curriculum. And not only was this freeing for our teachers, but it was freeing for our children to learn they were okay. They didn't have to learn in one way. And it was liberating for parents as well to find that there were different ways of learning their children. It sounds so archaic now, but at that time it was immensely unpopular. And we received a lot of pushback. We also created a teacher training program because we felt that in order for teachers to give their heart, their soul, their spirit, they needed to also look at themselves and look at their beliefs of education and to really examine how to help children find who they are on a deeper level. We also decided that when children are doing homeschooling, they go back to their parents. And if there isn't support from parents, often what we had done during the day online or through their curriculum was lost. And so we began an incredible parent training program that allowed parents to go back, look at their own learning process, evaluate how they were taught, what was important at the time they were being taught. And believe it or not, there were many parents who had many traumatic experiences with learning. And our goal was to help them reevaluate how they learn so that they could help their children to learn in a new and amazing way. We also realized that socialization was extremely important. That was always the first question parents asked is, what about socialization? And so we decided to create clubs for children. We have 30 clubs for children, everything from equestrian clubs to music clubs to environmental clubs to cooking clubs to music clubs. And this gave children a diverse ability to explore their talents. Now, at the beginning, it was quite challenging before the internet arrived, which I'm going to share with you. But it was so exciting to see these children being able to express their joy and their hope and to not be burned out by school. Our goal was to never have children to feel like, I have to do more work just because I have to do more work. We also felt that there was an importance to being appreciated of the earth and its native people. We, from the very beginning, included the Mohawk Indians, the Hopi Indians, the Navajo Indians into our curriculum. We spent a lot of time on their reservations. So we had students who were local, who went with me to the Hopi reservations. We spent weeks there and actually filmed some incredible videos, which I'll talk about. We also thought it was important to incorporate a compassion. How do you bring kindness, compassion, love into the work you're doing? How do you support peer-to-peer communication? And how do you create new leaders for the 21st century with 21st skills? So as you can imagine, this was 1991, 92, 93. This was unheard of. And I have to be honest and say that we were not met with open arms from the public school system, but things changed. In the middle of this, we really embraced our environmental vision. We were awarded the Unep Global 500 Award. We made 3 videos on We Can Make a Difference. We interviewed children all over the world, and we interviewed children on the Hopi Reservation, and we explored what it meant to make a difference. And at that time, the term "we can make a difference" was relatively new. The United Nations named a symposium or a big forum after us called "We Can Make a Difference." We went and attended and shared our videos, which were given the accolade of the Global 500 Award. We then decided, okay, we've been working in a very small and constrained environment. How do we expand and reach the world? And so after 1993, we created the first online course called Kids for Earth. This was approved by the United Nations and shared not only in the United States and in public schools, but all over the world. We created multiple programs, a trial where the students actually did a hearing between Mother Earth and Father Time to ascertain, did we have time to save our Earth? We worked with the Mohawk Indians, and we worked with children in over 4,000 districts to create Earth treaties in which they asked for the forgiveness of Mother Earth to help them to make a new plan and a new promise to the Earth. And it was incredibly moving. And our latest program, which actually Anitra did an amazing presentation, is called Meetings with Remarkable Men and Women, in which we bring in experts to talk about the environment. And Anitra did an incredible job on carbon sequestration. Those go on to this very day, and hundreds of children attend their symposiums. So this was like, I would say this was a work in progress. We were creating as we were going on. We were bootstrapping. We didn't have a lot of money. We actually had very little money, but we had a vision. And that vision, I continue to say, is every child is a living human treasure capable of manifesting brilliance. Now, I do want to say that many of our families were working class families. We did not charge a lot for our program. We needed to make enough money to be profitable, but mostly to really disseminate our materials. And then the most amazing thing happened. In 1993 and 94, there was an incredible earthquake in the United States. And it was a huge earthquake in Los Angeles. And all of the libraries were closed. And not only that, there was a budget cut. So not only were libraries closed, aquariums were closed, the government was closed. And we were, because we're a critical, we had a very, very focus on critical thinking, we needed to get those kids access to information. We had a young girl come to us who said, I just got on to the internet and discovered there's 50,000 sites on Romania. And that was our big aha. It happened before anybody else. And we said, let's create a curriculum, an online curriculum. How hard can that be? We were so naive. We started with 38 students. It was email delivered. It was not delivered through a learning management system. And we were a dramatic disappointment of our program. 19 of our children dropped out. And we realized we had work to do, but it was in alignment with our mission that we needed to get these children access to information. And as we worked, we went to Alabama, we worked with different groups to create the first learning management system, which will allow children to post their work online. The teachers would grade the work online and send it back to the children. And again, it was a test of our determination and focus, and we went through many iterations, and we finally came up with what we called Aurora, which was our legacy learning management system, which was a success. We wrote our first online personalized learning curriculum that gave our children access to the ability to learn and to express themselves and to discover their goals and talents. And interestingly, it ignited interest from President Clinton, and from Brian Gumbel. They called us the wave of the future. And we were aired all over the United States on TV, on MSNBC.com, on Today Show. And all of a sudden, we went from a California tiny little program, 72 children, to children enrolling in 100 countries. And I think this is a great example of, to me, disruptive technology. How do you make these changes? And in a way, in a very naive way, but the need was great. And we adapted just as we are doing now. And so now Laurel Springs has over 8,000 to 9,000 students who enroll every year in 100 countries. So I want to share with you some of our challenges. So in 1998, after we had started our online curriculum, I was feeling very confident about who we are and very, had that great sense of vigor and joy that you have when you're starting something new, and also and when you're very young. And I was invited to public schools in Ohio, and I presented the first option for public schools, or first example for online learning in 1998. I was booed off the stage. The teachers and the principals were shouting, seat time, seat time, seat time. It was really a shock, traumatic. I thought we had created something that everybody would want. This was a new way of learning. And we quickly regrouped and realized that we had to address the needs of teachers and their fear about seat time. We did it not by focusing on seat time, but on focusing on 36 lessons a year. And eventually, not immediately, that fulfilled the need for that interested teachers and began to help them feel that they could delineate that, okay, seat time is not learning. And we really focused on how do you delineate? What is the difference between seat time and true learning? In 2000, charter schools began in the United States. Those were the emergence of new ways of thinking that allowed for the integration of children having more freedom to learn in ways that were appropriate to them. And we did online charter schools. We were not the founders of that. We provided the mode of delivery. They took our information and turned it into an opportunity. In 2003, INACO, which is the International Association for Online Learning, was formed. We were one of their first members. The first time we went to a meeting, there were 36 attendees. Now there are over 4,000. Eventually, book publishers began to look at online learning. That was a really rough road for us. There was a lack of appreciation for what we were doing, and it was not seen as authentic. But slowly, the interest was emerging. There was a seed, and it was growing rapidly. Then what happened, which was so interesting, we had created our own learning management system, our own online curriculum, and people began to delineate educational management systems. This is a profitable opportunity. And all of a sudden, there was a growth in new ways of developing management systems and curriculum. So now we didn't have to design all our own curriculum. We had over 250 choices for these students, text-based, project-based, and online. And all of a sudden, we had the opportunity to work with individuals who were designing systems who had more money than we had. Remember, we started with $17,000. These companies had millions. And at the same time, we were contacted by Malaysia, China, Japan, and Korea, and helped them to design their first online learning programs. That was not without its challenge. Japan saw online learning as a dropout system for students who couldn't conform. Korea was new to online learning, and it was considered to be dishonorable to do that. Malaysia was very interested, and China saw it as a gateway to teaching their children English. So all of a sudden, we had stepped from being a tiny school into a huge milieu. So the question always that people ask and you hear about is, how do children score in online learning? How do they do? Can they socialize? And so I wanted to just share with you some of the latest data, the class of 2020 from Laurel Springs. We have here a comparison of how they did on their SAT reasoning, SAT math scores, comparable with their ACT. And in every area, they have been scoring higher than children in California and nationally. This has also been validated by the University of Colorado and Georgia, who has discovered that on students who learn at home, if learned appropriately, and I will go into the difference, something that John has also worked on, how do you teach children using online technology to ensure that you're not only giving them the nuts and bolts, but also creating whole individuals with leadership and with the ability to imagine their dreams, to really coalesce into creating the human beings they want to be. We wanted children who would become the new leaders of the world. And I have to say that 94% of all Laurel Springs students are accepted to the college of their choice. Their children that they birth go on to do incredible things. And we have had a beautiful happening of parents who go on to be neuroscientists, doctors, teachers. And I will get you that information. I have asked our team at Laurel Springs to produce that, and they're still working on that. When you have 8,000 to 10,000 students a year, coalescing and collecting all that information has been a challenge. But I do want you to know that our students did very well. And it's also indicative of children who are taught online, who are given ample time to learn at their own pace. So one of the things I wanted to share with you is one of the things we discovered, that children learn in a very different way when they're learning at home. They learn at their own pace. They learn about things that are of interest to them. The parents learn how they need to learn. And it's very different in traditional classrooms, where in America we call it mob control, where much of their time is spent just organizing the kids, getting them to sit down, getting through their classwork. And we've discovered our students do between 25 to 60% more. And also that there's less time taken. This has been, I have to move, I'm actually, oops, let me go back. So we've discovered that children who learn at home often can grasp the information being learned quickly. And this has been delineated and validated by multiple organizations because they're learning in a way that's appropriate to their learning style. And we consider that to be very important. We designed the first online learning style. Our teachers are trained in that. The children are educated in their learning styles. The parents are taught about it. And what's so interesting is they can advocate for the way they learn. So instead of a negative connotation of how they're learning, they can actually say, well, the way I learn best is I'm a visual learner, or I need to do it hands-on. I need to hear that again. And I've been so proud of our students who had been delineated as having learning disabilities are able now to advocate for the way that they learn best. And we've seen it as it represented in the work they're doing and also in their enthusiasm for their learning. So one of the things I wanted to share with you, and this is something Itra and I talked about, is there's an incredible flexibility now to online learning. Imagine where we were when we had 38 students receiving their material by email and on sites on the internet that were incredibly unstable. Before I jump into this, I'll just share that some of the fun things. We were using the Monterey Bay Aquarium. They shut it down when there was a budget cut and said, we cannot share with you the site. Talk to your senator. And on another day at UC Davis, the squirrels ate the wires. There was no opportunity for the children to do online learning. All of that has been, to some extent, worked out. And isn't it exciting to see the adaptation that has taken place? But here are some of the ways that I have seen distance learning being used and could be used. We've used it for full and part-time students who are in Laurel Springs or in public school. We've used it for disasters such as poverty and the lack of opportunity to work in a school setting. We work with Hole in the Wall in India, where we provide curriculum to children who they were in poverty and they can go and actually access information in the slums using this information, going on and doing schoolwork. Weather, we've used it for snow days, for hurricanes. It's been incredible. And one child said to me, this is so annoying. There's no more snow days. I have to do my work at home. We've used it where there's lack of facility and teachers. What do you do in small villages where their teachers are not highly educated? This is an opportunity that still needs to be explored. Diverse learners. We really, really promote how children learn in multiple different ways and the multiple intelligences that we've looked at through the work of Howard Gardner, that believes in that they were not only intelligent in our literacy and fluency in math and English, but also in our ability to love animals, to love music, physical intelligence. And we And it goes on. And we use that with our children. Children who are emotionally challenged, we have a number of children that we have had the opportunity to heal from physical and emotional challenges. We are known in many ways for our work in working with children who are involved with sports, dance, and acting. We really can't be in school. And most important, flexible time options. I know that John talked about this with WhatsApp. When you have asynchronous learning opportunities, you have the chance to work at your own pace. We did try to do synchronous learning, but we have children in 100 countries. And so we had to find a more flexible mode of delivery, and also to allow us to work at their pace and to give children the chance to feel that how they are working and what they're working on is appropriate for them at this time. And every child learns at a different pace, and every child needs that opportunity to learn in a way that's appropriate to them. These are the benefits of online learning. I'm going to leave that for you to study because I know we have limited time. So here we are now, 38 students in 1993. And here we are in 2019, where $101 billion is spent on e-learning. They expect that by 2030, there will be an increase to 350. How is that possible? We started with 38 children. No one was doing it. It was considered the bane of education, lack of seat time, lack of ability to validate children's learning. And it has expanded into learning apps, conferencing tools, virtual online learning. And now this has moved into a whole new area. So I like to think that we were the beginning of the disruptive technology. We did it not because we were looking to make money or to create a new approach that would grow us a profit. We did it because we needed to customize to the needs of the time and to adjust to children's learning. And now, as you know, distance learning is being used across the entire world, including Asia, Africa, and Latin America. And of course, this picture is just indicative of what has happened with Zoom and the opportunity for people who have computer access to get on to Zoom. I want to check what time it is. Okay. So I love John Gilmer's work. I feel a great connection to what he's doing. And he's taken me to a next level because I was working in the field in the United States where there are many challenges and children are suffering in many areas and there is a digital divide. But how to move education into a focus that is global so that we can solve this dire education problem. And then COVID came. And as John shared, that COVID shows that connectivity is no longer a privilege. It is really a human right. And all of a sudden, the work that we had been doing that had already come to a point where I would say its time had almost come. With COVID, there was a huge leap in adaptation to using technology in ways that we had not considered and we wouldn't have considered. Sometimes you need to be pushed. And as we shared yesterday in a meeting with Carlos and our wonderful team, this was the springboard or the leaping point to something new. What happened with COVID? We had 1.38 billion children who were being affected by this staggering situation all over the world. And it was dire. And what was so amazing to me was connecting with schools in Israel, in Africa, in China, in Japan, where 90% of the countries were trying to figure out how to implement some form of distance learning. So we have 1.38 billion children impacted by COVID. That is staggering and continues to disrupt education worldwide. It hasn't been solved. In California, we're still homeschooling. Around the world, we are still looking at ways to provide children with education. And I'm going to actually give you an example in Afghanistan in a little while. This is unprecedented, but as Jane Goodall says, she has faith and hope in the human spirit. And I always think of that, and I've talked to her about this many times, and I have faith too, as challenging as it is. And so we are adaptive human beings, and after this huge challenge, and all of a sudden it was so amazing, people were using the word distance learning, online learning, home education, words that we had been sharing really since 1973, and then in 1991 with Laurel Springs. And it's been an incredible honor to be part of this process. But what is our challenge? So the challenge is the inequality, the inequity. 463 million children still remain without school. There's lack of policies. I mean, every country is so different. It is an amazing thought. How do you take a world together? How do you change the worldview? What is the tipping point to take us to the next level so that our dear, amazing children will be able to be educated? The lack of equipment, the lack of a coordination, the challenges of 94 million children in Africa, 15 million children in the Middle East without an education, which was always already an issue before this and has now been even more exacerbated. So we have moved into a new technology. We have disrupted the way that we're learning. And at the same time, we are looking for what is the tipping point? What is the challenge to our paradigm? How do we shift the way that we educate our children? And what's so amazing is it's on the forefront. It's no longer in the background. Distance learning, online learning is no longer an idea whose time will come. Its time has come. We want to talk about disadvantages. We have to address that. The lack of laptop, children who do not have connectivity, children who struggle to participate, the gap between income brackets, and the challenge of being with other children. And I think that some of the work that John has done, the work that we are working to do to connect children and to integrate socio-emotional learning, consciousness learning, leadership, we hope will make a huge difference. So one more thing, smartphones. This is one of the most brilliant opportunities I think we have come across. Computers are important. Way back in the 1990s, we worked with one laptop. I worked with the World Bank and the concept of getting one phone into every village. But now what do we do? Laptops are not easily available in certain countries, but smartphones are. And in many countries, this is becoming the opportunity for the rapid spread of digital learning. The key is not only having a cell phone, the key is how to use it adequately and how to penetrate into those areas that have not had it, and also how to culturally provide an opportunity for individuals for whom allowing their children to use a cell phone has been considered a travesty. So we're going to go into that in a minute because I wanted to give you a small background into what it's taken to get to this point from 1993 to 2021. And I have to say, I feel honored to have been and to be part of this process. So what I'd like to do now is take you to a land of great challenge and a place that I've grown to dearly love. This was never, I've worked in the United States mainly, in China, Japan, Malaysia, but I had never worked in Afghanistan. And Afghanistan truly has had one of the most challenging situations that I've ever experienced. And it came to me because of some work that my daughter was doing. But it has been a devastated country. And to be honest, when I first heard about it, I veered away. I didn't know Afghanistan. I didn't have a connection to it, but I could see that there was an opportunity. And then what happened was, I'm going to jump ahead and share this with you first. So in 2013, while I was transforming my relationship with Laurel Springs, I'm on the leadership board. My daughter did a video called Girl Rising, which is about 9 extraordinary girls from developing countries. She shot the portion on Educate Girls Now in Afghanistan. It was heartbreaking. This little girl, Amina, is married at 11, has a baby at 12, and has a very dark future for going forward. We shot this in Morocco rather than Afghanistan. It was too dangerous. I was introduced to the BBC, who wrote the script and interviewed the real little girl. And she and I connected, and she said to me, I know we can do this together. And I said, I know nothing about Afghanistan. I don't know how to educate kids and children in Afghanistan. And she said, well, I do. The answer are the mothers. And so we began with 296 children in 5 provinces, one of which I'm not mentioning because of the danger that it would cause some of our girls there who are under Taliban rule. And what we discovered is that if we can provide families with food, clothing, support, emotional support, and with an agreement that every child goes to school, that we can educate girls. And what often happens in Afghanistan is girls are sold into child marriage because they are desperate. So our team has dealt with multiple challenges: disappearance of children, negotiating the stop of marriage proposals, and a dedicated team that works emotionally, physically, mentally with our families to support them. So I just wanted you to know that that's why we're talking to Afghanistan. As you know, Afghanistan has a tremendous challenge. It's heartbreaking to think that the literacy rate is so low. And of those children, 3.7 million are struggling to receive any education, and the girls are really targeted in this area. It's just one of the most challenging places that I've ever worked. And I have discovered that in order to keep girls from being married, what do you need to do? You need to provide them with an education. It's so simple. If parents have food, they don't sell their children. Mothers don't want to sell their children into marriage. But when you're desperate, you do desperate things. And unfortunately, girls are a commodity in Afghanistan, but they don't want to be. And that's the exciting part. So we would talk a bit about the violence against women, the challenges of women being married to older men. None of this, by the way, of all our girls, no one has been married into a child marriage. And the one child that we had to lose was kidnapped by the Taliban, which we couldn't prevent. The teachers that teach these children have very, very low educational qualifications. But what we've been able to do is lend a helping hand. And similar to, I think, what I see in LEAP, when you reach out with compassion and love and you provide opportunity, human beings are incredibly open to support. And so we began Educate Girls Now. We had to get the consent of the community. The community is very important. We had to get the consent of the mothers and to some extent the fathers. I wish I could say that we were able to get consent from fathers, but many of the fathers are missing in action or have been addicted to heroin. So what happens when a family can't afford to go to school? The children go out on the street and beg. They're married at young ages. There's high risk of childbearing. And these children grow, young children who are also not able to be able to promulgate or to create a new world. And as I shared, so Education Girls Now was created for that. Now, jumping to distance learning. How does distance learning affect Afghanistan? Afghanistan, as I was sharing, this is what we do. We visit with our families. We provide fuel during the winter, and we also teach leadership skills to our families. This is a lovely family in Herat, who I just absolutely adore. All these pictures are of our families. And you can see the difference of what it means to show your face, to feel proud of who you are as a woman. So what we have done is provide the mothers with empowerment. When you empower a mother, you empower a girl. When you empower a mother, you empower a son. And when you empower a mother, you empower a community. And that is what we've been doing. And it's been so simple. The key is the children must go to school. And we will not accept any family who will not send their children to school. And these schools are being run in various provinces using various methodologies. So I do want to say that some of them are public, some are private, some are madrasas, but this has been life-changing for these girls. So here's our challenge. We wanted to create leadership programs for our girls and for our mothers. They're not going to receive that in school. The school methodology is a very rote learning approach to education. And we've just begun to move into an opportunity to provide students with a chance to see that leadership, goal setting, and fulfilling their dreams are really important. This has never been talked about in Afghanistan. As it was shared with me from a wonderful mom in Afghanistan, you don't ask how you're doing. You don't ask a girl how she's doing. This is what you do. You go to school, you learn if you can go to school, and you memorize. So what we discovered as we looked at how do we bring leadership skills into our communities, well, there's a huge challenge. You can see that there's very little internet access. There's little, the TV access has grown in the cities and as radio, but in the rural areas, and we do work in some of the most rural of the rural areas, this is a huge challenge. But every family has at least one smartphone. So isn't that interesting? In the middle of this huge lack of connectivity, smartphones are common. And so what did we do? Here's 3 of our children, by the way, all of them now have shoes on because in order for them to go to school, we had to get them dressed. And this is their home. And these are their, we got them clothes to go to school. So what we did is we are providing every family with a smartphone. Every girl will have hopefully the access to use of a smartphone. Here's our challenge. In Afghanistan, a girl using a smartphone is considered a loose woman. So what do you do when you're being told that you're a loose woman for using a smartphone? You educate the mothers. And so we have been working closely with our team, our amazing team from the BDC, and with the mothers to make it acceptable that every week our girls receive a lesson on leadership, goal setting, and the creation of a better future, which every mother wants. And in that process, the mothers are taking the courses with the girls. And we've discovered that we've begun slow. The community is beginning to become open to this. There is acceptance in some of the provinces, not in one that I can't mention. And we've been able to begin to address, what is your goal as a woman? What is your option? What are your hopes for leadership, for well-being? These are questions that hadn't been asked, but they're inside them. They're endemic in every child, because every child is a living human treasure capable of manifesting brilliance. And so we have begun this process. I don't have the data that I am so looking forward to having, and by next month, we will have our first group of data. But what we have discovered that of our families, Only 15% have had resistance to being open to doing this. And because the mothers are in charge, the fathers have agreed to it. So, investing in girls, investing in education, this is the only way to ensure the future. When you are married older, you have your children and your families are healthier. This is the only way to empower women, to bring them into government, to bring them into education. 5 of our girls have gone on to university. We did not expect that when we first started Educate Girls Now. And cell phones are the stepping stone to collaborating. And we now have 3 local schools that are interested in working with us on how do we share this information with them. It may be paper-based at first, but the chances are that it will go online. So scaling, this is the last slide. Look at where we are. We need to scale quickly. We need bold movements, and this cannot be done without technology. It isn't the only answer because you need to have the methodology, you need to have the philosophy, and you need to have the infrastructure. But we have an opportunity here. And as you can see from who is funding these ed tech innovations, it's very important to look at how do we make technology and scaling a sustainable process. Cell phones are purchased. Somebody is making money. And our goal is to make education an opportunity that can be profitable for people. That we want people in the United States, around the world, to participate in making education an idea whose time has come. For our children, for our future, UNICEF projects that it is possible by 2030 that all 3.5 billion children could have access to personalized distance learning. We have the possibility. It takes thinking beyond the box. It takes brainstorming as a group. It takes looking at how we can be voyagers into the future, but it's already happening, as has been demonstrated by LEAP and demonstrated by these small enclaves around the world that are beginning to use technology in ways we never imagined. And when we look back to 1993 to 2021, we really have come a long way. And this is an idea whose time has come. And we've needed to push the envelope and adapt in ways we never thought was possible. If we can do this, just imagine what else we can do. Thank you. And I wanted to share with you this beautiful quote. This is what makes the difference. This is a young soul in Herat who fought to have an education when it was not even possible. Her parents didn't allow her to. She went to school on her own, and she imagined her future on her own. And she learned to be herself as an independent learner. She learned not to wait for life to change her destiny. And she used her education as a tool. And she moved forward. It is a possibility. Human beings are innately talented with that spark of brilliance that can change the world. And I, like Jane Goodall, have faith in the human spirit. Thank you. Please feel free to contact me, and thank you.
Anitra, unmute yourself, please.
And I got, okay. Thank you so much, Marilyn. It was just very inspirational how you have taken this concept of distance learning around the world to these women and girls who have so few opportunities and so few options. And this is really one of the places where it's going to do an enormous amount of good because they don't have to go out into a male society and on the street even in order to get educated, but they can stay at home and be educated and do some of their female domestic groups. So I think it's wonderful. From the moment I met Marilyn, which I think was in a tent at the Rio Conference on the Environment, and we were all sitting there having been awarded this very prestigious United Nations Environment Program award. And she told me I could see huge numbers of uses, because at that time, nobody was using the internet for education. And I could see all these little people sitting on islands around the world who didn't have opportunities to have further education, and were the head of resource governance or were the head of an education department, but simply stopped being educated when they finished college. And now the rest of us were being educated on a yearly basis in conferences and workshops, and I could see huge numbers of usefulness. But COVID has shown us all what enormous usefulness there is. Art has the first question, and on the deck will be Dr. Doherty, I think, or perhaps Ted Manning on the deck for the next question after that. And I want to tell you something, which is I'm getting, okay, Ted Manning, yes, is on the deck, and also Dave Doherty. So both of you, please unmute yourself, and Art, let it rip.
Okay. Well, Marilyn, I'm really, really moved by your presentation. I thought that was excellent. Well, one of the questions, of course, which passed through my mind as you were presenting was the concept of the value of knowledge if you don't apply it. And once you have educated people, clearly you need some means for this knowledge to be applied in their life, either as a job or as in some other way around the home. I don't know. Each culture, I'm sure, is different. What is your experience on that? I mean, you did partially address it in one of your slides, and I'd just like to explore that a little bit further. What comes after education?
It's such a great question. Thank you for asking that, because the whole methodology of the whole mission of the work that we've been doing is to create leaders for a new world. And so, first of all, throughout their entire education, they are doing community service activities. They're engaged in supporting their community. And then after they leave Laurel Springs, they're left with a mandate, or we now work with children in Afghanistan, that you can make a difference. And how are you going to give back to your community? And, you know, different than, like, say, South Africa, it's going to look very different when you have children from 100 countries. But we have been really focusing on social service, adapting what they've been learning, using it for the good of humanity, and creating new ways to create a better world. So we always include in the process, it's a circle, that they have to learn, share their emotions. It's a spiritual, but they have to give back to the world, that this is part of the mandate of being a human being at this time and place.
Thank you, Marilyn. So the next, Dave Doherty, and with Ted Manning on deck, followed by John Hollins on deck, followed by John Gilmore on deck. So if you all want to unmute yourselves, go ahead, Dave.
Hi.
Are you there?
Yeah, I think I'm unmuted. So I have very limited experience with both online learning and homeschooling, but my experience with homeschooling has been particularly problematic, because what I have seen happen is parents using it to limit things to which their children are exposed. So to push it to an extreme, a flat earther society, a flat earther society couple with a kid might ensure that the child is never exposed to Copernicus, or the fact that we've been to the moon, we've seen that the earth is in fact a sphere, we know we can fly around it, we can orbit it, and all that. They just have made sure their children never are exposed to those things. Have you experienced that kind of what I would label as a danger in homeschooling?
Good question. So with Laurel Springs, no, because we are a secular organization. And so people who come to us are usually of like mind. When I started the Catholic program, Mother of Divine Grace, it was definitely at a very different theological perspective. But where we came together is on our love of humanity and children, and we agreed to agree on that. There are groups that are, that I would say use homeschooling in a way that I would not consider to be appropriate. And usually there may be a religious or a philosophical connotation, but my experience of homeschoolers is that they think for themselves, they're independent learners, they're not turned off to education, they're not turned off to learning, and they want to go out and do things. And that's the kind of learners that we work with, which is project-based, hands-on. And yes, there is going to always be a segment of individuals who are going to take it to that area. And that isn't the group that I would be focusing on. But you are right, that has happened. And I don't have for you an answer on that, but I can tell you that that's not the way that we see homeschooling. But we do, even with those groups, acknowledge the importance of really focusing on the importance and brilliance of each child, because we're hoping that that will bring forth the treasure, no matter how they've been raised, and that they can think on their own.
Thank you, Marilyn. Ted Manning is next, followed by on deck John Gilmore, because I have a note here. John Myers says not me, but okay. Ted?
Yeah, I like the project-based focus that you just led to, because I come at it from a totally different perspective. I want to change adults' minds, sometimes which are already ossified. But the point is that we have found, even through the Club of Rome linkages, through Ranjit Kumar's and Marsha Malitz's stuff, we've been developing distance learning capacity as mentoring. So that in a sense, we've been running ordinary training programs around the world, but we can't be there all the time. And so the new technology has allowed us actually to answer questions in 24 hours in another language the other side of the world. That really makes a difference. So my observation is we have an immense capacity to do better. And therefore, I'm just trying to open the conversation to say, how are we going to build on these fabulous technologies we now seem to have access to, and as well as putting them out to everybody else? How are we going to really make a difference?
Well, one of the things that I've been so excited about is this creative community of inventive, technology-oriented and people that I've been in touch with who are thinking next iteration of 21st century skills, next iteration of how we can move forward using technology in a really good way. And I think that that's the answer, is that in this area, we join forces with those other individuals who are really focused on this. And there are some fantastic opportunities for us to do that, because this is continuing to grow and process. And as I said, it's going to be a $350 billion business by 2030. And so I think you're right. How do we do this? And the answer is that we bring in that group of people into our thought process so that they can share and expand with us how they're taking it to the next level.
Just a quick follow-up.
Thank
Peter Menke, who's one of our members, has been working directly with small island developing states who are disadvantaged from a number of perspectives in many cases. And I think if he was here, I don't see him here, but I was going to ask him specifically.
He's here.
He is.
He's here.
Peter Menke?
Yes.
Okay, if he would, if we can get him to go next on how these distance learning would actually better foster the small island developing states in trying to get in the loop more effectively. Yes, Peter, you are here. Good.
But
I am. I was just getting a cup of tea. Sorry.
but could we let John, who's been on deck a long time, speak, and then Peter?
Sure.
Thank you.
Anytime.
Thank you. John?
Well, thank you very much. And Marilyn, you know, you're a real gift, and thank you for your pioneering spirit and for being willing to take the risks because of a passion you felt for the gap in schooling, which was the gap around creativity, social emotional learning, and the individual learning paths. And I think that's the critical element of online learning, is it opens choices. And isn't it an irony that here we sit tonight in an online learning community learning? And last night we were in an online learning community learning, but we had the choice. We had the choice to engage, and we had the choice to put our hands up, and we have the choice to, I think that that's what online learning is bringing into education. So just to counter Dave's fear around the kind of molding of the mind, that's been happening in classrooms since the very first classroom was structured. That's how wars are created. That's how ideologies have been perpetuated. The beauty of online learning is it unlocks your own choice to be investigative. You can't be restricted in the sort of small box that the online learning is the window to, because that window opens many, many other windows. I'd like, Marilyn, just for you to make a comment on peer learning, because, you know, the peer learning framework is really almost more powerful now than primary learning of a teacher and a student. How do you mitigate some of the complexities of the challenges of peer learning on online learning, just at a high level?
Sure. Thank you. Thank you, John. Well, first of all, yes, that has been a huge challenge, and it's something that we've evolved over the years. And so we have 3 different methodologies for doing that. We have clubs, and I don't know why, but that has, I shouldn't say I don't know why, that has been one of our best to bring children together for a common goal, whether it's helping the community or learning French cooking. It has brought such joy to these children. Then in addition, we do have a peer-to-peer group, and these are students who are trained. They've gone through a program. It's a huge honor. And they are allowed to work with other children and to speak with them and to share with them. And we do have a teacher who is available in the background who can participate. And in addition to that, what we've discovered is that teaching the teachers has been so essential. For us, when you have teachers who are educated in the opportunity of distance learning and using it in a fluent way to support the children to come out and be who they are, that miracles happen. And so we've sort of worked on clubs. We have a student government, actually. We also do peer-to-peer, and we do have teachers who are being trained to participate in the process. And for
Thank you, Marilyn. Thank you very much.
Welcome.
So now we're going to go to Peter Meineke with Bill Reese briefly on deck, who's going to reiterate what he said yesterday about the cognitive learning of the forebrain and the other parts of the brain learning and creating synapses between them. And then finally, if Jean Doherty would get on deck, could say a final thank you on behalf of KCOR, and I'll say one on the behalf of the group and UNICEF. So please let it rip, Peter.
Okay. Thank you. I am muted.
And then I
will
have
Oh, and I'll do that.
I,
But it's
it's such a pleasure to hear the success you've had, Marilyn. I have to confess, I started working on computer-assisted learning back in the late 60s at Arundel College at the University of Toronto. I saw all sorts of potential. We had some incredible programs using a very, very old, wonderful language, which has gone by the boards called APL. When I moved to Prince Edward Island, we set up something called the Small Islands Information Network. It wasn't necessarily for learning, but to allow small islands to share information and learn from each other about what was important for the economic development. It has been a long time coming, and I congratulate you for your perseverance. I certainly didn't have it, and it's good to see it successful. Ted mentioned in his chat a number of other organizations. I would like to mention another one that is very successful, doing some very similar work, and that is the Commonwealth of Learning. Monday was Commonwealth Day. It's celebrating our Commonwealth countries around the world, and the Government of Canada organized a wonderful webinar showing with interviews with young children who had been affected and helped so much by the programs offered by the Commonwealth of Learning. They teach teachers, as you do, and it is an incredible success story that I have to say no one knows about. I have to take the opportunity to mention it. Sorry, just to mention about Dave's comment. I mean, this is going on absolutely in the internet generally. There are enclaves, and it is terrible. But as far as the education is concerned, there was an absolutely beautiful book called Educated, of a young woman in the mid-states who was homeschooled, but ended up revolting and going out and getting a PhD, and wrote her book about her life, which was a remarkable story to tell. And I just mentioned that as it can happen the other way as well, Dave.
Thank you, Peter. Bill, would you like to talk about the learning process in the brain, which was extremely educational for many of us yesterday?
Yeah, just a couple of things. First of all, Marilyn, I thought that was a brilliant presentation. I have nothing but admiration for your persistence and the success that you've shown here. But I guess I had a question as I was listening that parallels Dave's, and I'll get to the brain learning business in a moment. But look, the world is in despair. It's being ruined by the best educated people on the planet. People with PhDs and MBAs and BAs and so on and so forth are the ones responsible for the dismantling of the ecosphere. It's not the uneducated people. Now, I guess what I'm really asking is, we heard a wonderful process talk, but I heard nothing about the content of what goes into the minds that you're preparing here. Is that something under your control? Or is it something that you say it's self-learning and it's open, the students can go whichever way they want? So that's my question. Here's the point that I made yesterday. We know now from cognitive psychology that repetition of ideas or experiences in the course of a developing brain literally creates synaptic networks that then embed that way of thinking. So we wind up with a kind of patterned way of thinking or a patterned way of experiencing the world. And once this way is in place, once you've acquired that, it becomes the filter through which one views the world, right? And it then, you tend to seek out experiences in people that reinforce your pre-existing network, as it were, and go into a state of denial about all contrary information. And that's why we get into the situation we have, where the world is now run by a kind of an economic paradigm that's taken 50 years to ingrain, but is based on the idea of efficiency and growth. So what are we learning through online learning that would help to move us to a different way of thinking about the nature of reality in the world, so that we don't simply increase the efficiency with which we destroy the planet?
I'm so glad you brought that up, because I really appreciated what you said yesterday, and it particularly applied for me for Afghanistan and trying to work with mothers and families to make, excuse me, to make it okay for girls to use cell phones. I mean, this whole mindset. But what I really believe in the dialogue system. And with our students, we really value their voice. And so the kinds of questions that you're asking are the kinds of questions we're asking them, because there has to be a fluidity and a flexibility. And within the curriculum, they are perceiving different points of view, and they're also being asked to reevaluate for themselves and look inside themselves and see how this affects them. And I want to say that I would love to explore more of this, because that's been our goal from the beginning, is to not to create a solid state, but to keep it open and to be able to create a neuroplasticity around learning. And so the way that we've done it is by imagining yourself in different situations, being a different person, sharing your ideas, hearing other points of view, and being able to state what you believe in, being heard, and also hear other points, other ways of thinking.
Thank you.
Thank you. So the final word on this recording is going to be uttered by the president of KCOR, the very gracious and charming Jean Doherty. And then Art can turn off his stop worrying about recording and turn it off. But Marilyn and I will stick around for another half hour and answer any more questions that various people would like. Jean, take it away.
Thank you, Anitra. Marilyn, that was an absolutely fabulous presentation. And as people have been saying, I'm in awe that you were able to sustain your interest in being able to do this. I just don't know how you managed to do that in the period of time that you've been working at this. I tend to just sort of fold up my tent and go away when I hit those kinds of obstacles. You did a marvelous presentation, and you have got some absolutely marvelous things going on in the work that you're doing. It's so valuable. Thank you very much on behalf of KCOR. I really appreciate what you've been able to do for us today. Thank you.
Thank you so much.